Hello again. Welcome back to the Whaling Hour. We're dropping a few frames today, but I'm hoping it'll pick back up so that we can get through our 6 chapters today. All right. Let's get started and see how we do. Chapter 33. The Specksnyder. Concerning the officers of the whale craft, this seems as good a place as any to set down a little domestic peculiarity on shipboard, arising from the existence of the harpooner class of officers, a class unknown, of course, in any other marine than the whale fleet. The large importance attached to the harpooner's vocation is evinced by the fact that, originally in the old Dutch fishery, 2 centuries and more ago, the command of a whale ship was not wholly lodged in the person now called the captain, but was divided between him and an officer called the Specksnyder. Literally, this word means fat cutter. Usage, however, in time made it equivalent to chief harpooner. In those days, the captain's authority was restricted to the navigation and general management of the vessel, while over the whale hunting department and all its concerns, the Specksnyder, or chief harpooner, reigned supreme. In the British Greenland fishery, under the corrupted title of Specksnyder, this old Dutch official is still retained, but his former dignity is sadly abridged. At present, he ranks simply as senior harpooner, and as such is but one of the captain's more inferior subalterns. Nevertheless, as upon the good conduct of harpooners in the success of a whaling voyage largely depends, and since in the American fishery he is not only an important officer in the boat, but under certain circumstances, night watches on a whaling ground, the command of the ship's deck is also his. Therefore, the grand political maxim of the sea demands that he should nominally live apart from the men before the mast, and be in some way distinguished as their professional superior, though always, by them, familiarly regarded as their social equal. Now, the grand distinction drawn between officer and man at sea is this: the first lives aft, the last forward. Hence, in whale ships and merchantmen alike, the mates have their quarters with the captain. And so, too, in most of the American whalers, the harpooneers are lodged in the after part of the ship. That is to say, they take their meals in the captain's cabin and sleep in a place indirectly communicating with it. Though the long period of a southern whaling voyage, by far the longest of all voyages now or ever made by man, the peculiar perils of it, and the community of interest prevailing among a company, all of whom, high or low, depend for their profits not upon fixed wages, but upon their common luck, together with their common vigilance, intrepidity, and hard work, though all these things do in some cases tend to beget a less rigorous discipline than in merchantmen generally, yet never mind how much like an old Mesopotamian family these whalemen may, in some primitive instances, live together. For all that, the punctilious externals, at least, of the quarterdeck are seldom materially relaxed, and in no instance done away. Indeed, many are the Nantucket ships in which you will see the skipper parading his quarterdeck with an elated grandeur not surpassed in any military navy, nay, extorting almost as much outward homage as if he wore the imperial purple, and not the shabbiest of pilot cloth. And though of all men the moody captain of the Pequod was the least given to that sort of shallowest assumption, and though the only homage he ever exacted was implicit, instantaneous obedience, though he required no man to remove the shoes from his feet ere stepping upon the quarterdeck, and though there were times when, owing to peculiar circumstances connected with events hereafter to be detailed, he addressed them in unusual terms, whether of condescension or in terrorem or otherwise, yet even Captain Ahab was by no means unobservant of the paramount forms and usages of the sea. Nor perhaps will it fail to be eventually perceived that behind these forms and usages, as it were, he sometimes masked himself, incidentally making use of them for other and more private ends than they were legitimately intended to subserve. That certain sultanism of his brain, which had otherwise in a good degree remained unmanifested, through those forms that same sultanism became incarnate in an irresistible dictatorship. For be a man's intellectual superiority what it will, it can never assume the practical, available supremacy over other men without the aid of some sort of external arts and entrenchments, always in themselves more or less paltry and base. That it is that forever keeps God's true princes of the empire from the world's hustings, and leaves the highest honors that this air can give to those men who become famous more through their infinite inferiority to the choice hidden handful of the divine inert than through their undoubted superiority over the dead level of the mass. Such large virtue lurks in these small things when extreme political superstitions invest them, that in some royal instances, even to idiot imbecility, they have imparted potency. But when, as in the case of Nicholas the Tsar, the ringed crown of geographical empire encircles an imperial brain, then the plebeian herds crouch abased before the tremendous centralization. Nor will the tragic dramatist who would depict mortal indomitableness in its fullest sweep and direst swing ever forget a hint, incidentally so important in his art, as the one now alluded to. But Ahab, my captain, still moves before me in all his Nantucket grimness and shagginess, and in this episode touching emperors and kings, I must not conceal that I have only to do with a poor old whale hunter like him, and therefore all outward majestical trappings and housings are denied me. O Ahab, what shall be grand in thee? It must needs be plucked at from the skies, and died for in the deep, and featured in the embodied air. Chapter 34. The Captain's Table. It is noon, and Doughboy, the steward, thrusting his pale loaf-of-bread face from the cabin scuttle, announces dinner to his lord and master, who, sitting in the lee-quarter boat, has just been taking an observation of the sun, and is now mutely reckoning the latitude on the smooth, medallion-shaped tablet reserved for that daily purpose on the upper part of his ivory leg. From his complete inattention to the tidings, you would think that moody Ahab had not heard his menial. But presently, catching hold of the mizzen-shrouds, he swings himself to the deck in an even, unexhilarated voice, saying, "Dinner, Mr. Starbuck," disappears into the cabin. When the last echo of his sultan's step has died away, and Starbuck, the first emir, has every reason to suppose that he is seated, then Starbuck rouses from his quietude, takes a few turns along the planks, and, after a grave peep into the binnacle, says, with some touch of pleasantness, "Dinner, Mr. Stubb," and descends the scuttle. The second emir lounges about the rigging a while, and then, slightly shaking the main brace to see whether it be all right with that important rope, he likewise takes up the old burden, and with a rapid, "Dinner, Mr. Flask," follows after his predecessors. But the third emir, now seeing himself all alone on the quarterdecks, seems to feel relieved from some curious restraint, for, tipping all sorts of knowing winks in all sorts of directions, and kicking off his shoes, he strikes into a sharp but noiseless squall of a hornpipe right over the Grand Turk's head, and then, by a dexterous sleight, pitching his cap up into the mizzen-top for a shelf, he goes down rollicking, so far at least as he remains visible from the deck, reversing all other processions by bringing up the rear with music. But ere stepping into the cabin doorway below, he pauses, ships a new face altogether, and then, independent, hilarious little Flask enters King Ahab's presence, in the character of Abjectus, or the slave. Is not the least among the strange things bred by the intense artificialness of sea usages that, while in the open air of the deck some officers will, upon provocation, bear themselves boldly and defyingly enough towards their commander, yet 10 to 1, let those very officers the next moment go down to their customary dinner in that same commander's cabin, and straightway their inoffensive, not to say deprecatory, and humble air towards him, as he sits at the head of that table. This is marvelous, sometimes most comical. Wherefore the difference? A problem? Perhaps not. To have been Belshazzar, king of Babylon, and to have been Belshazzar not haughtily but courteously, therein certainly must have been some touch of mundane grandeur. But he who in the rightly regal and intelligent spirit presides over his own private dinner table of invited guests, that man's unchallenged power and dominion of individual influence for the time, that man's royalty of state transcends Belshazzar's, for Belshazzar was not the greatest. Who has but once dined his friends has tasted what it is to be Caesar. It is a witchery of social czarship which there is no withstanding. Now, if to this consideration you superadd the official supremacy of a shipmaster, then by inference you will derive the cause of that peculiarity of sea life just mentioned. Over his ivory inlaid table, Ahab presided like a mute, maned sea lion on the white coral beach, surrounded by his warlike but still deferential cubs. In his own proper turn, each officer waited to be served. They were as little children before Ahab, and yet in Ahab there seemed to lurk the smallest social arrogance. There seemed not to lurk the smallest social arrogance. With one mind, their intent eyes all fastened upon the old man's knife as he carved the chief dish before them. I do not suppose that for the world they would have profaned that moment with the slightest observation, even so neutral a topic as the weather. No. And when reaching out his knife and fork, between which the slice of beef was locked, Ahab thereby motioned Starbuck's plate towards him. The mate received his meat as though receiving alms, and cut it tenderly, and a little started if perchance the knife grazed against the plate, and chewed it noiselessly, and swallowed it not without circumspection. For, like the coronation banquet at Frankfurt, where the German emperor profoundly dines with the 7 imperial electors, so these cabin meals were somehow solemn meals, eaten in awful silence. And yet, at table old Ahab forbade not conversation. Only he himself was dumb. What a relief it was to choking Stubb when a rat made a sudden racket in the hold below, and poor little Flask, he was the youngest son and little boy of this weary family party. His were the shin bones of the saline beef. His would have been the drumsticks. For Flask, to have presumed to help himself, this must have seemed to him tantamount to larceny in the first degree. Had he helped himself at that table, doubtless never more would he have been able to hold his head up in this honest world. Nevertheless, strange to say, Ahab never forbade him. And had Flask helped himself, the chances were Ahab had never so much as noticed it. Least of all did Flask presume to help himself to butter, whether he thought the owners of the ship denied it to him on account of its clotting his clear, sunny complexion, or whether he deemed that on so long a voyage in such marketless waters butter was at a premium and therefore was not for him a subaltern. However it was, Flask, alas, was a butterless man. Another thing. Flask was the last person down at the dinner, and Flask is the first man up. Consider, for hereby Flask's dinner was badly jammed in point of time. Starbuck and Stubb both had the start of him, and yet they also have the privilege of lounging in the rear. If Stubb even, who is but a peg higher than Flask, happens to have but a small appetite, and soon shows symptoms of concluding his repast, then Flask must bestir himself. He will not get more than 3 mouthfuls that day, for it is against holy usage for Stubb to precede Flask to the deck. Therefore it was that Flask once admitted in private that ever since he had arisen to the dignity of an officer, from that moment he had never known what it was to be otherwise than hungry, more or less. For what he ate did not so much relieve his hunger as keep it immortal in him. Peace and satisfaction, thought Flask, have forever departed from my stomach. I am an officer, but how I wish I could fist a bit of old-fashioned beef in the forecastle, as I used to when I was before the mast. There's the fruits of promotion now. There's the vanity of glory. There's the insanity of life. Besides, if it was so that any mere sailor of the Pequod had a grudge against Flask, in Flask's official capacity, all that sailor had to do, in order to obtain ample vengeance, was to go aft at dinner time and get a peep at Flask through the cabin skylight, sitting silly and dumbfounded before awful Ahab. Now, Ahab and his 3 mates formed what may be called the first table in the Pequod's cabin. After their departure, taking place in an inverted order to their arrival, the canvas cloth was cleared, or rather was restored to some hurried order by the pallid steward, and then the 3 harpooneers were bidden to the feast, they being its residuary legatees. They made a sort of temporary servants' hall of the high and mighty cabin. In strange contrast to the hardly tolerable constraint and nameless, invisible domineerings of the captain's table was the entire carefree license and ease, the almost frantic democracy of those inferior fellows, the harpooneers. While their masters, the mates, seemed afraid of the sound of the hinges of their own jaws, the harpooneers cheered their food with such relish that there was a report to it. They dined like lords. They filled their bellies like Indian ships all day loading with spices. Such portentous appetites had Queequeg and Teshtigo that to fill out the vacancies made by the previous repast, often the pale doughboy was fain to bring on a great baron of salt junk, seemingly quarried out of the solid ox. And if he were not lively about it, if he did not go with a nimble hop, skip, and jump, then Teshtigo had an ungentlemanly way of accelerating him by darting a fork at his back, harpoon-wise. And once, Daggoo, seized with a sudden humor, assisted Doughboy's memory by snatching him up bodily and thrusting his head into a great empty wooden trencher, while Teshtigo, knife in hand, began laying out the circle preliminary to scalping him. He was naturally a very nervous, shuddering sort of little fellow, this bread-faced steward, the progeny of a bankrupt baker and a hospital nurse, and what the standing spectacle of the black, terrific Ahab and the periodical tumultuous visitations of these three savages, Doughboy's whole life was one continual lip-quiver. Commonly, after seeing the harpooneers furnished with all things they demanded, he would escape from their clutches into his little pantry adjoining and fearfully peep out at them through the blinds of its door till all was over. It was a sight to see Queequeg seated over against Teshtigo, opposing his filed teeth to the Indians. Crosswise to them, Daggoo seated on the floor, for a bench would have brought his hearse-plumed head to the low carlines. At every motion of his colossal limbs, making the low cabin framework to shake, as when an African elephant goes passenger in a ship. But for all this, the great Negro was wonderfully abstemious, not to say dainty. It seemed hardly possible that by such comparatively small mouthfuls he could keep up the vitality diffused through so broad, baronial, and superb a person. But doubtless this noble savage fed strong and drank deep of the abounding element of the air, and through his dilated nostrils snuffed in the sublime life of the worlds. Not by beef or by bread are giants made or nourished. But Queequeg, he had a mortal, barbaric smack of the lip in eating, an ugly sound enough, so much so that the trembling doughboy almost looked to see whether any marks of teeth lurked in his own lean arms. And when he would hear Teshtigo singing out for him to produce himself that his bones might be picked, the simple-witted steward all but shattered the crockery hanging round him in the pantry by his sudden fits of the palsy. Nor did the whetstones which the harpooneers carried in their pockets for their lances and other weapons, and with which whetstones at dinner they would ostentatiously sharpen their knives, that grating sound did not at all tend to tranquilize poor Doughboy. How could he forget that in his island days, Queequeg, for one, must certainly have been guilty of some murderous convivial indiscretions? Alas, Doughboy, hard fares the white waiter who waits upon cannibals. Not a napkin should he carry on his arm, but a buckler. In good time, though, to his great delight, the three salt-sea warriors would rise and depart, to his credulous, fable-mongering ears, all their martial bones jingling in them at every step like Moorish scimitars in scabbards. But though these barbarians dined in the cabin, and nominally lived there, still, being anything but sedentary in their habits, they were scarcely ever in it except at meal times, and just before sleeping time, when they passed through it to their own peculiar quarters. In this one matter, Ahab seemed no exception to most American whale captains, who, as a set, rather inclined to the opinion that by rights the ship's cabin belongs to them, and that it is by courtesy alone that anyone else is at any time permitted there. So that in real truth the mates and harpooneers of the Pequod might more properly be said to have lived out of the cabin than in it. For when they did enter it, it was something as a street door enters a house, turning inwards for a moment only to be turned out the next, and as a permanent thing residing in the open air. Nor did they lose much hereby. In the cabin was no companionship. Socially, Ahab was inaccessible. Though nominally included in the census of Christendom, he was still an alien to it. He lived in the world as the last of the grizzly bears lived in settled Missouri. And as when spring and summer had departed, that wild Logan of the wood, sucking his own paws, so in his inclement, howling old age, Ahab's soul, shut up in the carved trunk of his body, there fed upon the sullen paws of its gloom. Chapter 35. The Mast-Head. It was during the more pleasant weather that, in due rotation with the other seamen, my first masthead came round. In most American whalemen, the mastheads are manned almost simultaneously with the vessel's leaving her port, even though she may have 15,000 miles and more to sail ere reaching her proper cruising ground. And if, after a 3, 4, or 5 years' voyage, she is drawing nigh home with anything empty in her, say, an empty vial even, then her mastheads are kept manned to the last, and not till her skysail poles sail in among the spires of the port does she altogether relinquish the hope of capturing one whale more. Now, as the business of standing mastheads, ashore or afloat, it is a very ancient and interesting one, let us take some measures expatiate here. I take it that the earliest standers of mastheads were the old Egyptians, because in all my researches I find none prior to them. But though their progenitors, the builders of Babel, must doubtless by their tower have intended to rear the loftiest masthead in all of Asia or Africa either, yet, ere the final truck was put to it, as that great stone mast of theirs may be said to have gone by the board in the dread gale of God's wrath. Therefore we cannot give these Babel builders priority over the Egyptians. And that the Egyptians were a nation of masthead standers is an assertion based upon the general belief among archaeologists that the first pyramids were founded for astronomical purposes, a theory singularly supported by the peculiar stair-like formation of all 4 sides of those edifices, whereby, with prodigious long upliftings of their legs, those old astronomers were wont to mount to the apex and sing out for new stars, even as the lookouts of a modern ship sing out for a sail whale just bearing in sight. And St. Stylites, the famous Christian hermit of old times, who built him a lofty stone pillar in the desert, and spent the whole latter portion of his life on its summit, hoisting his food from the ground with a tackle. In him we have a remarkable instance of a dauntless stander of mastheads, who is not to be driven from his place by fogs or frosts, rain, hail, or sleet, but valiantly facing everything out to the last, literally died at his post. Of modern standers of mastheads we have but a lifeless set, mere stone, iron, and bronze men, who, though well capable of facing out a stiff gale, are still entirely incompetent to the business of singing out upon discovering any strange sight. There is Napoleon, who, upon the top of the column of Vendôme, stands with his arms folded some 150 feet in the air, careless now who rules the decks below, whether Louis Philippe, Louis Blanc, or Louis the Devil. Great Washington, too, stands high aloft on his towering mainmast in Baltimore, and like one of Hercules' pillars, his column marks that point of human grandeur beyond which few mortals will go. Admiral Nelson, also, on a capstan of gunmetal, stands his masthead in Trafalgar Square. And even when most obscured by that London smoke, token is yet given that a hidden hero is there. For where there is smoke, must be fire. But neither Great Washington, nor Napoleon, nor Nelson will answer a single hail from below, however madly invoked to befriend by their counsels the distracted decks upon which they gaze. However, may be surmised that their spirits penetrate through the thick haze of the future, and descry what shoals and what rocks must be shunned. It may seem unwarrantable to couple in any respect the masthead standards of the land with those of the sea, but that in truth it is not so, is plainly evinced by an item for which Obed Macy, the sole historian of Nantucket, stands accountable. The worthy Obed tells us that in the early times of the whale fishery, ere ships were regularly launched in pursuit of the game, the people of that island erected lofty spars along the sea-coast, to which the lookouts ascended by means of nailed cleats, something as foul go upstairs in a henhouse. A few years ago, the same plan was adopted by the bay whalemen of New Zealand, who, upon descrying the game, gave notice to the ready-manned boats nigh on the beach. But this custom has now become obsolete. Turn we, then, to the one proper masthead, that of a whale ship at sea. The 3 mastheads are kept manned from sunrise to sunset, the seamen taking their regular turns, as at the helm, and relieving each other every 2 hours. In the serene weather of the tropics, it is exceedingly pleasant. The masthead Nay, to a dreamy meditative man, it is delightful. There you stand, 100 feet above the silent decks, striding along the deep as if the masts were gigantic stilts, while beneath you and between your legs, as it were, swim the hugest monsters of the sea, even as ships once sailed between the boots of the famous Colossus at Old Rhodes. There you stand, lost in the infinite series of the sea, with nothing ruffled but the waves. The trance ship indolently rolls, the drowsy trade winds blow, everything resolves you into languor. For the most part, in this tropic whaling life, a sublime uneventfulness invests you. You hear no news, read no gazettes, extras with startling accounts of commonplaces never delude you into unnecessary excitements. You hear of no domestic afflictions, bankrupt securities, fall of stocks, are never troubled with the thought of what you shall have for dinner. For all your meals for 3 years and more are snugly stowed in casks, and your bill of fare is immutable. In one of those southern whalemen, on a long 3 or 4 years voyage, as often happens, the sum of various hours you spend at the masthead would amount to several entire months. And it is much to be deplored that the place to which you devote so considerable a portion of the whole term of your natural life should be so sadly destitute of anything approaching to a cozy inhabitiveness, or adapted to breed a comfortable localness of feeling, such as pertains to a bed, a hammock, a hearse, a sentry box, a pulpit, a coach, or any of those small and snug contrivances in which men temporarily isolate themselves. Your most usual point of perch is the head of the topgallant mast, where you stand upon 2 thin parallel sticks, almost peculiar to whalemen, called the topgallant cross trees. Here, tossed about by the sea, the beginner feels about as cozy as he would standing on a bull's horns. To be sure, in coolish weather, you may carry your house aloft with you, in the shape of a watchcoat, but properly speaking, the thickest watchcoat is no more of a house than the unclad body. For as the soul is glued inside of its fleshy tabernacle and cannot freely move about in it, nor even move out of it, without running great risk of perishing, like an ignorant pilgrim crossing the snowy Alps in winter, so a watchcoat is not so much of a house as a mere envelope, or additional skin encasing you. You cannot put a shelf or chest of drawers in your body, and no more can you make a convenient closet out of your watchcoat. Concerning all this, it is much to be deplored that the mastheads of a southern whale ship are unprovided with those enviable little tents or pulpits called crow's nests, in which the lookouts of a Greenland whaler are protected from the inclement weather of the frozen seas. In the fireside narrative of Captain Sleet, entitled A Voyage Among the Icebergs in Quest of the Greenland Whale, and incidentally for the rediscovery of the lost Icelandic colonies of Old Greenland, in this admirable volume, all standards of mastheads are furnished with a charmingly circumstantial amount of the then recently invented crow's nest of the glacier, which was the name of Captain Sleet's good craft. He called it the Sleet's crow's nest in honor of himself, he being the original inventor and patentee, and free from all ridiculous false delicacy, and holding that if we call our own children after our own names, we fathers being the original inventors and the patentees, so likewise should we denominate after ourselves any other apparatus we may beget. In shape, the Sleet's crow's nest is something like a large tierce or pipe. It is open above, however, where it is furnished with a movable side screen to keep to windward of your head in a hard gale. Being fixed on the summit of the mast, you ascend into it through a little trap hatch in the bottom. On the afterside, or side next the stern of the ship, is a comfortable seat with a locker underneath for umbrellas, comforters, and coats. In front is a leather rack in which to keep your speaking trumpet, pipe, telescope, and other nautical conveniences. When Captain Sleet in person stood his masthead in this crow's nest of his, he tells us that he always had a rifle with him, also fixed in the rack, together with a powder flask and shot, for the purpose of popping off the stray narwhals or vagrant sea unicorns infesting those waters, for you cannot successfully shoot at them from the deck, owing to the resistance of the water, but to shoot down upon them is a very different thing. Now, it was plainly a labor of love for Captain Sleet to describe, as he does, all the little detailed conveniences of his crow's nest, But though he so enlarges upon many of these, and though he treats us to a very scientific account of his experiments in this crow's nest, with a small compass he kept there for the purpose of counteracting the errors resulting from what is called the local attraction of all binnacle magnets, an error ascribable to the horizontal vicinity of the iron in the ship's planks, and in the Glacier's case, perhaps there having been so many broken-down blacksmiths amongst her crew. I say that though the captain is very discreet and scientific here, yet for all his learned binnacle deviations, azimuth compass observations, and approximate errors, he knows very well, Captain Sleet, that he was not so much immersed in those profound magnetic meditations as to fail being attracted occasionally towards that well-replenished little case bottle, so nicely tucked in on one side of his crow's nest within easy reach of his hand. Though, upon the whole, I greatly admire and even love the brave, the honest, and learned captain, yet I take it very ill of him that he should so utterly ignore that case bottle, seeing what a faithful friend and comforter it must have been, while with mittened fingers and hooded head he was studying the mathematics aloft there in that bird's nest within 3 or 4 perches of the pole. But if we southern whale fishers are not so snugly housed aloft as Captain Sleet and his Greenland men were, yet that disadvantage is greatly counterbalanced by the widely contrasting serenity of those seductive seas in which we southern fishers mostly float. For one, I used to lounge up the rigging very leisurely, resting in the top to have a chat with Queequeg, or anyone else off duty whom I might find there. Then ascending a little way further and throwing a lazy leg over the topsail yard, take a preliminary view of the watery pastures, and so at last mount to my ultimate destination. Let me make a clean breast of it here and frankly admit that I kept but sorry guard. With the problem of the universe revolving in me, how could I, being left completely to myself at such a thought-engendering altitude, how could I but lightly hold my obligations to observe all whale ships' standing orders, "Keep your weather eye open and sing out every time"? And let me in this place movingly admonish you, ye ship owners of Nantucket, beware of enlisting in your vigilant fisheries any lad with lean brow and hollow eye given to unseasonable meditativeness, and who offers to ship with the Phaedon instead of the Bowditch in his head. Beware of such an one, I say. Your whales must be seen before they can be killed, and this sunken-eyed young Platonist will tow you 10 wakes round the world and never make you 1 pint of sperm the richer. Nor are these monitions at all unheeded, for nowadays the whale fishery furnishes an asylum for many romantic, melancholy, and absent-minded young men, disgusted with the carking cares of the earth and seeking sentiment in tar and blubber. Childe Harold not unfrequently perches himself upon the masthead of some luckless, disappointed whale ship, and in moody phrase ejaculates, "Roll on, thou deep and dark blue ocean, roll! 10,000 blubber hunters sweep over thee in vain." Very often do the captains of such ships take those absent-minded young philosophers to task, upbraiding them with not feeling sufficient interest in the voyage, half hinting that they are so hopelessly lost to all honorable ambition as that in their secret souls they would rather not see whales than otherwise. But all in vain. Those young Platonists have a notion that their vision is imperfect. They are short-sighted. What use, then, to strain the visual nerve? They have left their opera glasses at home. "Why, thou monkey," said a harpooner to one of those lads, "we've been cruising now hard upon 3 years, and thou hast not raised a whale yet. Whales are as scarce as hen's teeth whenever thou art up there." Perhaps they were, or perhaps there might have been shoals of them in the far horizon, but lulled into such an opium-like listlessness of vacant, unconscious reverie is this absent-minded youth, by the blending cadence of waves with troughs, waves with thoughts, that at last he loses his identity, takes the mystic ocean at his feet for the visible image of that deep, blue, bottomless soul, pervading mankind and nature, and every strange, half-seen, gliding, beautiful thing that eludes him, every dimly discovered uprising fin of some undiscernible form seems to him the embodiment of those elusive thoughts that only people the soul by continually flitting through it. In this enchanted mood, thy spirit ebbs away to whence it came, becomes diffused through time and space like Wycliffe's sprinkled pantheistic ashes, forming at last a party of every shore the round globe over. There is no life in thee now, except that rocking life, imparted by a gently rolling ship, by her borrowed from the sea, by the sea from the inscrutable tides of God. But while this sleep, this dream is on ye, move your foot or hand an inch, slip your hold at all, and your identity comes back in horror. Over Descartes vortices you hover. And perhaps at midday, in the fairest weather, with one half-throttled shriek, you drop through that transparent air into the summer sea, no more to rise forever. Heed it well, you Pantheists. Chapter 36. The Quarterdeck. Enter Ahab. Then all. It was not a great while after the affair of the pipe that one morning shortly after breakfast, Ahab, as was his wont, ascended the cabin gangway to the deck. There most sea captains usually walk at that hour as country gentlemen. After the same meal, take a few turns in the garden. Soon his steady ivory stride was heard as to and fro he paced his old rounds upon planks so familiar to his tread that they were all over dented, like geologic stones, with the peculiar mark of his walk. Did you fixedly gaze, too, upon that ribbed and dented brow? There also you would see still stranger footprints, the footprints of his one unsleeping, ever-pacing thought. But on this occasion, in question, those dents looked deeper, even as his nervous step that morning left a deeper mark. And so, full of his thought was Ahab, that at every uniform turn that he made, now at the mainmast and now at the binnacle, you could almost see that thought turn in him as he turned, and pace in him as he paced, so completely possessing him, indeed, that it all but seemed the inward mold of every outer movement. "D'ye mark him, Flask?" whispered Stubb. "The chick that's in him pecks the shell. 'Twill be out soon." The hours wore on. Ahab, now shut up within his cabin, anon pacing the deck with the same intense bigotry of purpose in his aspect. It drew near the close of day. Suddenly he came to a halt by the bulwarks, and inserting his bone leg into the auger hole there, and with one hand grasping a shroud, he ordered Starbuck to send everybody aft. "Sir," said the mate, astonished at an order seldom or never given on shipboard except in some extraordinary case. "Send everybody aft," repeated Ahab. "Mastheads there! Come down!" When the entire ship's company were assembled, and with curious and not wholly unapprehensive faces were eyeing him, for he looked not unlike the weather horizon when a storm is coming up, Ahab, after rapidly glancing over the bulwarks and then darting his eyes among the crew, started from his standpoint, and, as though not a soul were nigh him, resumed his heavy turns upon the deck. With bent head and half-slouched hat he continued to pace, unmindful of the wondering whispering among the men, till Stubb cautiously whispered to Flask that Ahab must have summoned them there for the purpose of witnessing a pedestrian feat. But this did not last long. Vehemently pausing, he cried, "What do ye do when ye see a whale, men?" "Sing out for him," was the impulsive rejoinder from a score of club voices. "Good!" cried Ahab, with a wild approval in his tones, observing the hearty animation into which his unexpected question had so magnetically thrown them. "And what do ye do next, men?" "Lower away and after him." "And what tune is it ye pull to, men?" "A dead whale or stove boat." More and more strangely and fiercely glad and approving grew the countenance of the old man at every shout, while the mariners began to gaze curiously at each other, as if marveling how it was that they themselves became so excited at such seemingly purposeless questions. But they were all eagerness again, as Ahab, now half revolving in his pivot hole, with one hand reaching high up a shroud and tightly, almost convulsively grasping it, addressed them thus: "All ye mastheaders, have before now heard me give orders about a white whale. Look ye! Do ye see this Spanish ounce of gold?" Holding up a broad, bright... "It is a $16 piece, men. A doubloon. Do ye see it? Mr. Starbuck, hand me yon topmaul." And when the mate was getting the hammer, Ahab, without speaking, was slowly rubbing the gold piece against the skirts of his jacket as if to heighten its luster, and without using any words, was meanwhile lowly humming to himself, producing a sound so strangely muffled and inarticulate that it seemed the mechanical humming of the wheels of his vitality in him. Receiving the topmaul from Starbuck, he advanced towards the mainmast, with the hammer uplifted in one hand, exhibiting the gold with the other, and with a high-raised voice exclaiming, "Whosoever of ye raises me a white-headed whale with a wrinkled brow and a crooked jaw, whosoever of ye raises me that white-headed whale with 3 holes punctured in his starboard fluke, look ye, whosoever of ye raises me that same white whale, he shall have this gold ounce, my boys." "Huzzah! Huzzah!" cried the seamen, as with swinging tarpaulins they hailed the act of nailing the gold to the mast. "It's a white whale, I say," resumed Ahab, as he threw down the topmaul. "A white whale. Skin your eyes for him, men. Look sharp for the white water. If ye see but a bubble, sing out." All this while Tashtego, Daggoo, and Queequeg had looked on with even more intense interest and surprise than the rest, and at the mention of the wrinkled brow and crooked jaw, they had started as if each was separately touched by some specific recollection. "Captain Ahab," said Tashtego, "that white whale must be the same that some call Moby Dick." "Moby Dick?" shouted Ahab. "Do ye know the white whale then, Tash?" "Does he fantail a little curious, sir, before he goes down?" said the gay-headed deliberately. "And has a curious spout, too," said Daggoo. "Very bushy, even for a parmacetti, and mighty quick, Captain Ahab." "And he have 1, 2, 3, good many iron in him hide, too, Captain," cried Queequeg disjointedly. "Or twisty betwisk like him, faltering hard for a word and screwing his hand round and round as though uncorking a bottle, like him. "Corkscrew!" cried Ahab. "Aye, Queequeg, the harpoons lie all twisted and wrenched in him. Aye, Daggoo, his spout is a big one like a whole shock of wheat, and white as a pile of our Nantucket wool after the great annual sheep shearing. Aye, Tashtego, and he fantails like a split jib in a squall. Death and devil's men, it is Moby Dick ye have seen. Moby Dick! Moby Dick!" "Captain Ahab," said Starbuck, who with Stubb and Flask had thus far been eyeing his superior with increasing surprise, but at last seemed struck with a thought which somehow explained all the wonder. "Captain Ahab, I have heard of Moby Dick. But it was not Moby Dick that took off thy leg?" "Who told thee that?" cried Ahab, then pausing. "Aye, Starbuck. Aye, me hearties, all around. It was Moby Dick that dismasted me. Moby Dick that brought me to this dead stump I stand on now. Aye, aye," he shouted with a terrific loud animal sob like that of a heart-stricken moose. "Aye, aye, it was that accursed white whale that received me, made a poor pegging lubber of me forever and a day." Then tossing both arms with measureless imprecations, he shouted out, "Aye, aye, and I'll chase him round Good Hope, and round the Horn, and round the Norway Maelstrom, and round perdition's flames before I give him up. And this is what ye have shipped for, men. To chase that white whale on both sides of land and all over all sides of earth, till he spouts black blood and rolls fin out. What say ye, men? Will ye splice hands on it now? I think ye do look brave." "Aye, aye," shouted the harpooneers and seamen, running closer to the excited old man. "A sharp eye for the white whale! A sharp lance for Moby Dick! God bless ye!" He seemed to half sob and half shout. "God bless ye, men! Steward, go draw the great measure of grog." "But what's this long face about, Starbuck? Mr. Starbuck, wilt thou not chase the white whale? Art not game for Moby Dick?" "I am game for his crooked jaw, and for the jaws of death too, Captain Ahab, if it fairly comes in the way of the business we follow. But I came here to hunt whales, not my commander's vengeance. How many barrels will thy vengeance yield thee, even if thou gettest it, Captain Ahab? It will not fetch thee much in our Nantucket market." "Nantucket market! Hoot! But come closer, Starbuck. Thou requirest a little lower layer. If money's to be the measure of man, and the accountants have computed the great counting houses, the globe, by girdling it with guineas, 1 to every 3 parts of an inch, then let me tell thee that my vengeance will fetch a great premium. Here!" "He smites his chest," whispers Stubb. "What's that for? Methinks it rings most vast, but hollow." "Vengeance on a dumb brute," cried Starbuck, "that simply smote thee from blindest instinct? Madness! To be enraged with a dumb thing, Captain Ahab, seems blasphemous." "Hark ye yet again. The little lower layer. All visible objects, man, are but as pasteboard masks. But in each event, in the living act, the undoubted deed, there some unknown but still reasoning thing puts forth the moldings of its features from behind the unreasoning mask. If man will strike through the mask. How can the prisoner reach outside except by thrusting through the wall? To me, the white whale is that wall shoved near to me. Sometimes I think there's naught beyond, but 'tis enough. He tasks me. He heaps me. I see him in outrageous strength, with an inscrutable malice sinewing it. That inscrutable thing is chiefly what I hate. And be the white whale agent, or be the white whale principal, I will wreak that hate upon him. Talk not to me of blasphemy, man. Is even that fair play? Who's over me? Truth hath no confines. Take off thine eye. More intolerable than fiends' glarings is a doltish stare. So, thou reddenest and palest. My heart has melted thee to anger glow. But look ye, Starbuck, what is said in heat, that thing unsays itself. There are men from whom warm words are small indignity. I meant not to incense thee. Let it go. Look, see yonder Turkish cheeks of spotted tone, living, breathing pictures painted by the sun, the pagan leopards, the unrecking and unworshipping things that live and seek and give no reasons for the torrid life they flee. The torrid life they feel. The crew, man, the crew. Are they not one and all with Ahab in this matter of the whale? See Stubb, he laughs. See yonder Chilean. He snorts to think of it. Stand up amid the general hurricane. Thy one tossed sapling cannot, Starbuck. And what is it? Reckon it. 'Tis but to help strike a fin. No wondrous feat for Starbuck. What is it more? From this one poor hunt, then, the best lance out of all Nantucket, surely he will not hang back when every foremast has clutched a whetstone. Ah! Constraining sees thee. I see, the billow lifts thee. Speak, but speak. Aye, thy silence, then, that voices thee. Aside. Something shot from my dilated nostrils. He has inhaled it in his lungs. Starbuck now is mine. Cannot oppose me now without rebellion. God keep me. Keep us all, murmured Starbuck lowly. But in his joy at the enchanted tacit acquiescence of the mate, Ahab did not hear his foreboding invocation, nor yet the low laugh from the hold, nor yet the presaging vibrations of the winds in the cordage, nor yet the hollow flap of the sails against the masts as, for a moment, their hearts sank in. For again, Starbuck's downcast eyes lighted up with the stubbornness of life. The subterranean laugh died away. The winds blew on, the sails filled out, the ship heaved and rolled as before. Ah, ye admonitions and warnings. Why stay ye not when ye come? But rather are ye predictions than warnings, ye shadows. Yet not so much predictions from without as verifications of the foregoing things within. For with little external to constrain us, the innermost necessities in our being, these still drive us on. "The measure! The measure!" cried Ahab. Receiving the brimming pewter, and turning to the harpooneers, he ordered them to produce their weapons, then ranging them before him near the capstan, with their harpoons in their hands, while his 3 mates stood at his side with their lances, and the rest of the ship's company formed a circle round the group. He stood for an instant searchingly eyeing every man of his crew. But those wild eyes met his, as the bloodshot eyes of their prairie wolves meet the eye of their leader, ere he rushes on at their head in the trail of the bison. But alas, only to fall into the hidden snare of the Indian. "Drink and pass!" he cried, handing the heavy charged flagon to the nearest seaman. "The crew alone now drink. Round with it, round! Short draughts, long swallows, men. 'Tis hot as Satan's hoof. So! It goes round excellently. It spiralizes in ye. Forks at the serpent snapping eye. Well done. Almost drained. That way it went, this way it comes. Hand it to me. Here's a hollow. Men, ye seem the years. So brimming life is gulped and gone. Steward, refill! Attend now, my braves. I have mustered ye all round this capstan, and ye mates, flank me with your lances, and ye harpooneers, stand there with your irons, and ye stout mariners, ring me in, that I may in some sort revive a noble custom of my fishermen fathers before me. O men, you will yet see that. Ha! Boy, come back! Bad pennies come not sooner. Hand it me. Why, now, this pewter had run brimming again. What not thou St. Vitus imp? Away, thou ague! Away, thou ague! Advance, ye mates, cross your lances full before me. Well done. Let me touch the axis. So saying, with extended arm, he grasped the 3 level radiating lances at their cross center, while so doing, suddenly and nervously twitched them. Meanwhile, glancing intently from Starbuck to Stubb, from Stubb to Flask, it seemed as though by some nameless interior volition he would fain have shocked them into the same fiery emotion accumulated within the Leyden jar of his own magnetic life. The 3 mates quailed before his strong, sustained, and mystic aspect. Stubb and Flask looked sideways from him. The honest eye of Starbuck fell downright. "In vain!" cried Ahab, "but maybe 'tis well. For did ye 3 but once take the full force shock, then mine own electric thing, that had perhaps expired from out of me. Perchance, too, it would have dropped ye dead. Perchance ye need it not. Down, lances. And now, ye mates, I do appoint ye 3 cup-bearers to my 3 pagan kinsmen there. Yon 3 most honorable gentlemen and noblemen, my valiant harpooneers. Disdain the task? What, when the great Pope washes the feet of beggars, using his tiara for ewer? Oh, my sweet cardinals, your own condescension, that shall bend ye to it. I do not order ye. Ye will it. Cut your seizings and draw the poles, ye harpooneers. Silently obeying the order, the 3 harpooneers now stood with the detached iron part of their harpoon, some 3 feet long, held barbs up before him. Stab me not with that keen steel. Cant them over. Know ye not the goblet end? Turn up the socket. So. Now, ye cupbearers, advance. The irons, take them and hold them while I fill. Forthwith, slowly going from one officer to the other, he brimmed the harpoon sockets with the fiery waters from the pewter. Now, 3 to 3 ye stand. Commend the murderous chalices. Bestow them, ye who are now made parties to this indissoluble league. Ha! Starbuck! But the deed is done. Yon ratifying sun now waits to sit upon it. Drink, ye harpooners. Drink and swear, ye men, that the deathful whaleboat's bow. Death to Moby Dick. God hunt us all if we do not hunt Moby Dick to his death. The long, barbed steel goblets were lifted, and to cries and maledictions against the white whale, the spirits were simultaneously quaffed down with a hiss. Starbuck paled and turned and shivered. Once more, and finally, the replenished pewter went the rounds among the frantic crew, when, waving his free hand to them, they all dispersed, and Ahab retired within his cabin. Chapter 37. Sunset. The cabin, by the stern windows, Ahab sitting alone and gazing out. I leave a white and turbid wake, pale waters, paler cheeks where'er I sail. The envious billows sidelong swell to whelm my track. Let them, but first I pass. Yonder, by the ever-brimming goblet's rim, the warm waves blush like wine. The gold brow plumbs the blue. The diver sun, slow dived from noon, goes down. My soul mounts up, yet she wearies with her endless hill. Is then the crown too heavy that I wear, this iron crown of Lombardy? Yet is it bright with many a gem. I, the wearer, see not its far flashings, but darkly feel that I wear, that dazzlingly confounds. 'Tis iron, that I know, not gold. 'Tis split, too, that I feel. The jagged edge galls me so. My brain seems to beat against the solid metal. Aye, steel skull mine, the sort that needs no helmet in the most brain-battering fight. Dry heat upon my brow? Oh, time was when as the sunrise nobly spurred me, so the sunset soothed. No more. This lovely light, it lights not me. All loveliness is anguish to me, since I can ne'er enjoy. Gifted with the high perception, I lack the low enjoying power. Damned, most subtly and most malignantly. Damned in the midst of paradise. Good night, good night. Waving his hand, he moves from the window. 'Twas not so hard a task. I thought to find one stubborn at least, but my one cogged circle fits into all their various wheels, and they revolve. Or, if you will, like so many ant-hills of powder, they all stand before me, and I the match. Oh, hard, that to fire others and match itself must needs be wasting. What I've dared, I've willed, and what I've willed, I'll do. They think me mad. Starbuck does. But I'm demoniac. I am madness maddened. That wild madness that's only calm to comprehend itself. I lost this leg. I now prophesy that I will dismember my dismemberer. What I've dared, I've willed. And what I've willed, I'll do. They think me mad, Starbuck does. But I'm demoniac. I am madness maddened, that wild madness that's only calm to comprehend itself. The prophecy was that I should be dismembered. And I lost this leg. I now prophesy that I will dismember my dismemberer. Now then, be the prophet and the fulfiller one. That's more than ye great gods ever were. I laugh and hoot at ye cricket players, ye pugilists, ye deaf Burkes and blinded Bendigos. I will not say, as schoolboys do to bullies, take someone of your own size, don't pummel me. No, ye've knocked me down and I am up again. But ye have run and hidden. Come forth from behind your cotton bags. I have no long gun to reach ye. Come, Ahab's compliments to ye. Come and see if ye can swerve me. Swerve me, ye cannot swerve me, else ye swerve yourselves. Man has ye there, swerve me! The path to my fixed purpose is laid with iron rails, whereupon my soul is grooved to run. Over unsounded gorges, through the rifled hearts of mountains, under torrents' beds unerringly I rush. Naught's an obstacle, naught's an angle to the iron way. Chapter 38, Dusk. By the mainmast, Starbuck leaning against it. My soul is more than matched. She's overmanned, and by a madman. Insufferable sting that sanity should ground arms on such a field, but he drilled deep down and blasted all my reason out of me. I think I see his impious end, but feel that I must help him to it. Will I, nill I, the ineffable thing has tied me to him, tows me with a cable I have no knife to cut. Horrible old man. Who's over him, he cries. Aye, he would be a Democrat to all above. Look how he lords it over all below. Oh, I plainly see my miserable office. To obey, rebelling, and worse yet, to hate with touch of pity. For in his eyes I bred some lurid woe would shrivel me up had I it. Yet is there hope. Time and tide flow wide. The hated whale has the round watery world to swim in, as the small goldfish has its glassy globe. His heaven-insulting purpose God may wedge aside. I would up heart, were it not like lead, but my whole clock's run down. My heart, the all-controlling weight, I have no key to lift again. A burst of revelry from the forecastle. From the forecastle. Oh God, to sail with such a heathen crew that have small touch of human mothers in them. Whelped somewhere by the sharkfish sea, the white whales their demogorgon. Hark, the infernal orgies, that revelry is... Mark the unfaltering silence aft. Methinks it pictures life. Foremost through the sparkling sea shoots on the gay embattled bantering bow, but only to drag dark Ahab after it, where he broods within his sternward cabin, builded over the dead water of the wake, and further on, hunted by its wolfish gurglings. The long howl thrills me through. Peace, ye revelers, and set the watch, O life. 'Tis in an hour like this, with soul beat down and held to knowledge, as wild untutored things are forced to feed. O life. 'Tis now that I do feel the latent horror in thee. But 'tis not me. That horror's out of me. And with the soft feeling of the human in me, yet will I try to fight ye grim phantom futures. Stand by me. Hold me. Bind me, O ye blessed influences. Chapter 39. First Night Watch. Foretop. Stub, Solus, and mending a brace. Clear my throat. I've been thinking over it since, and that's the final consequence. Why so? Because a laugh's the wisest, easiest answer to all that's queer. And come what will, one comfort's always left. That unfailing comfort is, it's all predestinated. I heard not all his talk with Starbuck, but to my poor eye, Starbuck then looks something as I the other evening felt. Be sure the old mogul has fixed him, too. I twigged it. I knew it. Had the gift, might readily have prophesied it, for when I clapped my eye upon his skull, I saw it. Well, Stub. Wise Stub, that's my title. Well, Stub, what of it, Stub? Here's a carcass. I know not all that may be coming, but be it what it will, I'll go to it laughing. Such a waggish leering as lurks in all your horribles. I feel funny. Fa, la, lira, skira. What's my juicy little pair at home doing now? Crying its eyes out? Giving a party to the last arrived harpooneers? I dare say. Gay as a frigate's pennant, and so am I. Fa, la, lira, skira. Ah, we'll drink tonight with hearts as light to loves as gay and fleeting as bubbles that swim on the beaker's brim and break on the lips while meeting. A brave stave, that. Who calls? Mr. Starbuck? Aye, sir. He's my superior. He has his too, if I'm not mistaken. Aye, sir. Just through with this job. Coming. That's all for this week. We lost a few frames here and there, but I think we kept the audio. I'm hopeful we kept the audio. Because that was a big chunk of text. All right. Thanks again for joining us, and I will see you next week with the Whaling Hour.